October 1973. The certified letter arrived at Davis Farm on a Tuesday morning, the kind of envelope that makes a person's hands shake before they even break the seal. Rebecca Davis stood in the kitchen of the farmhouse her father had built 50 years earlier, reading the words that made no sense at all. First National Bank of Fresno foreclosure proceedings, failure to comply with debt. Covenant provisions, public auction scheduled November 15th. Except Rebecca Davis didn't have any debt. She owned every acre of her 720 acres, free and clear. Had paid cash for all of it over 3 decades of 16-hour days and calculated risks and yields that made other farmers quit and go work in town. The last time she'd borrowed money was 1951, and she'd paid that loan off in 4 years instead of 10, with interest that made the bank clerk whistle through his teeth when he stamped the final receipt. The letter sat on the kitchen table like a snake coiled to strike. Rebecca read it 3 times, then called her attorney, then read it again while waiting for him to call back. The language was dense and legal and designed to confuse, but the core claim was simple enough. The bank alleged she owed $180,000, secured by her property, and she had defaulted, and now they were taking everything. Her attorney's voice crackled through the phone line an hour later, tight, with the kind of anger lawyers usually hide better. Someone had filed lien documents claiming Rebecca had borrowed that money 5 years ago. The signatures looked close enough to hers that a casual observer might not notice. The notary seal was fake. The whole thing was fraud engineered to look legitimate, just long enough to force an auction where the property could be bought for 40 cents on the dollar by whoever orchestrated this. Rebecca knew exactly who that was. She'd beaten Donald Thompson once before 31 years ago by refusing to disappear when he told her women couldn't farm. Now he was trying a different approach, one that didn't require her cooperation or her failure. Just paperwork and a judge who might not look close enough at the signatures. This was the second time someone had tried to take her farm. The first time, she'd been 17 years old, standing in Thompson's dealership while he told her to go find a husband and stop embarrassing herself. She'd been born 8 miles from that store on land her father had made productive when everyone else called it worthless, and Thompson had looked at her like she was something stuck to his boot. That was April 1942, 5 weeks after her father died. 3 weeks after the town council tried to seize their property under the pretense of wartime security. The same spring, half the valley decided that German-American farmers were probably spies, that anyone with an accent didn't deserve the land they'd broken their backs to cultivate, that a teenage girl with dirt under her fingernails and her father's stubbornness had no business trying to run an operation. Men twice her age couldn't manage. Rebecca had walked out of that dealership with her face burning and her hands shaking and 60 miles to drive before she could find someone willing to sell her the parts she needed. She'd planted that spring crop with equipment held together by wire and hope, and she'd harvested it with her mother and 2 hired hands while the rest of Parlia waited for them to fail. 31 years later, she owned more land than Donald Thompson had ever dreamed of touching. Her operation produced yields that made agricultural journals send photographers. She employed 40 people year-round and paid them better than anyone else in the valley. And Thompson, who'd spent 3 decades watching her succeed at everything he said she couldn't do, had decided if he couldn't beat her legitimately, he'd try to steal what she'd built. Rebecca set the foreclosure notice aside and walked out to the barn where the 1934 Farmall F12 sat in the corner, the tractor that had saved her life when she was 19 and didn't have enough money to keep farming or enough sense to quit. The engine didn't run anymore, hadn't in 20 years, but she kept it clean and oiled because it reminded her of something her father used to say. Der Boden kennt die Wahrheit. The soil knows the truth. People lied. Banks lied. Men like Donald Thompson built entire lives on lies, but the soil didn't care about paperwork or prejudice or who was supposed to win. The soil rewarded work, and Rebecca Davis had been working since before she could remember. The question now was whether the legal system would recognize truth or just accept whatever documents looked most official. Her attorney was confident they could prove the fraud, but confident wasn't the same as certain, and Rebecca had learned a long time ago that justice wasn't guaranteed just because you deserved it. She ran her hand along the tractor's hood, the metal cool under her palm, and let herself remember the day her father first put her on a piece of equipment. She'd been 6 years old, barely tall enough to see over the steering wheel, and Joseph Davis had lifted her up and shown her how to work the clutch. Your feet will reach the pedal soon enough. For now, just learn how it feels. That was 1931. The Depression had everyone by the throat, and German farmers were already starting to feel the weight of old suspicions creeping back into neighbors' eyes. But Joseph Davis kept his head down and his yields up and taught his daughter that land didn't care about anyone's last name or where their grandparents were born. He'd arrived in California in 1919 with $80 and a willingness to work that made American-born farmers look lazy by comparison. 23 years old, fresh off a boat from Bavaria, speaking English like someone who'd learned it from books, which he had. Joseph Davis understood that accent would cost him opportunities, that his German name would close doors, that the alien land laws made it nearly impossible for immigrants to own property outright. So he worked. 6 years as a hired hand, saving every penny, sleeping in barns when the farmer didn't have a bunkhouse, eating whatever came cheap. He married Margaret Wilson in 1923, an Irish-American woman whose family looked at Joseph's accent with the same suspicion everyone else did, but who saw past it to the man who showed up before sunrise and worked until dark without complaint. Together, they bought 80 acres in 1924 land nobody else wanted. Heavy clay soil that held water like a bathtub and drained about as well. Rock hard when dry, soup when wet, productive never. The seller had been thrilled to get $12 an acre for property he'd written off as worthless. Joseph had looked at that soil and seen potential. The technique came from Bavaria, from farming traditions older than California had been a state. Tile drainage installed by hand, breaking up the clay subsoil, and creating channels that let water move instead of pooling. It took Joseph and Margaret 2 years to install the system across those 80 acres, digging trenches by hand when they couldn't afford to hire help laying pipe that Joseph sourced from a demolition yard in Fresno. By 1926, that worthless land was producing stone fruit that made neighboring farmers stop and stare. By 1928, Davis Farm was outproducing operations twice its size. By 1930, people stopped talking about Joseph's accent quite as much and started asking questions about his irrigation system instead. Rebecca was born November 1925 in the farmhouse Joseph built with lumber he'd salvaged and skills he'd taught himself. She grew up in those fields, learning to walk between the rows of peach trees, learning the difference between good soil and bad, by watching her father kneel down and run dirt through his fingers like he was reading a book. By the time she was 7, she could drive a team of horses. By 10, she could operate most of the farm equipment, standing on the footrests because her legs weren't long enough to reach properly, but understanding the mechanics well enough that Joseph trusted her with machinery worth more than everything else they owned combined. By 13, she was keeping the farm ledgers, tracking expenses and yields with a precision that made Margaret shake her head in wonder. The girl has a mind for numbers. Gets that from you. Joseph would smile and shake his head. She gets it from the land. Land teaches mathematics better than any school. You plant this much seed, you get this much crop. You sell at this price, you end with this profit. The land is honest. It shows you the numbers straight. Rebecca had loved that about farming, the clean mathematics of effort and result. You worked hard, you got harvest. You cut corners, you got failure. There was a purity to it that she'd never found anywhere else, a sense that the world operated on principles you could understand if you paid close enough attention. School had been different. School was where she learned that being tall for her age and stronger than most of the boys and better at practical problems than decorative ones marked you as strange. School was where teachers called her mannish for preferring overalls to dresses, where girls whispered that Rebecca Davis acted like she thought she was a boy, where the principals suggested to Margaret that perhaps their daughter would benefit from more feminine pursuits. Margaret had taken Rebecca home that afternoon and said something that stayed with her forever. Let them whisper. Whispers won't pay bills or put food on the table. You know who you are. That's enough. So Rebecca had kept wearing overalls when she worked, kept operating equipment, kept doing the farm bookkeeping while other girls her age were learning to set a proper table. By 1938, at 13 years old, she could outwork most grown men and outthink a fair number of them too. The county 4-H competition that year had included a plowing contest boys only until Rebecca showed up and asked why. Because it's for boys, so make it for everyone who can plow straight. Unless you're saying the boys need protection from competition. She'd won that contest plowing straighter rows than any of the 17 boys who entered, and the local newspaper had run a small article about it, with a photo of Rebecca standing next to her, furrows tall and serious, and completely uninterested in making herself smaller to soothe anyone's ego. Joseph had cut that article out and pinned it to the kitchen wall. When Rebecca asked why he'd touched the paper gently, because someday you'll need to remember that you already proved what you're capable of. Keep this for that day. That day came sooner than either of them expected. September 1939, Germany invaded Poland. 2 days later, Britain and France declared war. The news hit the San Joaquin Valley like a shockwave, and suddenly every German-American farmer felt eyes on them again, watching for signs of divided loyalty, listening for accents that might indicate sympathy for the wrong side. Joseph stopped speaking German in public. He'd always been careful about it, conscious that accent marked him as foreign even after 20 years in California. But now he wouldn't speak it even at home unless the windows were closed and no neighbors were within earshot. Margaret had learned enough German from him over the years to understand most conversations, and Rebecca was fluent, but the language became something practiced in whispers, a secret they kept from a world that had decided speaking the enemy's language made you the enemy. Small things changed first. Customers who'd bought Davis Farm fruit for years suddenly found other suppliers. The grocer in Parlier, who'd always greeted Joseph by name, started pretending not to see him when he came into the store. Rebecca's teachers at school stopped calling on her in class, started marking her papers more harshly, found reasons to keep her after school for infractions other students committed without consequence. Then came the vandalism. Someone cut their fence lines in November 1939, just enough that cattle from a neighboring property got into the young peach orchard and damaged 30 trees before Joseph could get them out. The sheriff came, looked at the cut wire, and wrote it up as mischief. Probably kids. Nothing we can do unless you saw who did it. Joseph hadn't seen, neither had Rebecca or Margaret. But they all knew it hadn't been kids. Kids didn't cut fence in 3 places precisely calculated to let cattle through. Kids didn't wait until Joseph was in Fresno buying supplies, and Margaret was visiting her sister in town, and Rebecca was at school. Someone had planned it, had waited for the right moment, had wanted to send a message. Gary Robinson showed up the next morning early before the sun cleared the eastern hills. He owned 160 acres adjacent to the Davis property. Scots-Irish stock, a WWI veteran who'd lost his brother to German artillery at Belleau Wood. He'd never been friendly to Joseph, never been hostile either, just maintained the cool distance of a man who remembered war dead and couldn't quite separate the Germany he'd fought from the German who farmed next door. Gary stood at the fence line, looking at the damaged trees and the cut wire, his face hard. "I saw who did it. Anderson's 2 oldest boys and that Miller kid from down the road. Their fathers put them up to it, waited until you were all gone, and sent the boys to do their dirty work." Joseph had studied Gary for a long moment. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because it's wrong. You didn't start that war over there. You're farming here, same as the rest of us. What happened to my brother was Germany's fault. What happened to your trees is cowards' work. Those are different things." Gary had walked away before Joseph could respond, and they hadn't spoken again for months. But the vandalism stopped, and Rebecca understood later that Gary must have confronted the families involved, must have made it clear that whatever he felt about Germany didn't extend to terrorizing a neighboring farmer. The uneasy peace lasted through 1940. Joseph and Margaret kept working, kept selling what fruit they could, kept their heads down and their mouths shut when conversations turned political. Rebecca finished her freshman year of high school avoiding fights and ignoring whispers, and maintaining grades good enough that teachers couldn't fail her even if they wanted to. Then, June 1941 brought something worse than vandalism. Rebecca found the irrigation main line cut on a Tuesday morning, 3 days into a heat wave that had temperatures climbing past 100 degrees by noon. The main line fed their entire stone fruit operation, 15 acres of peach trees that needed consistent water, or they'd drop fruit and potentially die outright in heat like this. Someone had cut the line in the middle of the night deliberately with a saw, and by the time Rebecca discovered it at dawn, the orchard had been without water for maybe 6 hours. She ran back to the house shouting for her father, and Joseph came out still pulling on his boots, took one look at her face, and started moving before she could explain. They spent the next 4 hours in blazing sun, digging out the damaged section, splicing in new pipe Joseph had to drive to Fresno to buy, getting the water flowing again while the peach trees wilted and dropped leaves. The trees survived barely. The repair cost them $80 they couldn't afford, and a crop reduction they could afford even less. The sheriff came, looked at the obviously sawed pipe, and wrote it up as vandalism perpetrator unknown. "You got enemies, Davis?" Joseph's jaw had tightened. "I farm. I pay my bills. I mind my business." "That's not what I asked." The sheriff had left without pursuing it further, and Joseph had stood in the damaged orchard, watching water finally flow through the repaired line, his face older than Rebecca had ever seen it. She'd asked the question she'd been holding since they found the cut. "Do you know who did it?" Joseph had shaken his head slowly. "Knowing doesn't help. Proving it does. We can't prove it." But Gary Robinson could guess. He showed up that evening, pulled Joseph aside, spoke in low tones that Rebecca couldn't hear from the porch. When Gary left, Joseph came back to the house and sat at the kitchen table with his head in his hands. Margaret had sat down across from him. What did Gary say? "He knows the families, same ones as before, plus 2 more. Their boys bragged about it in town, thought it was funny, said they were doing their patriotic duty, running off the kraut farmer. Gary told them if it happens again, he's going to the county newspaper with names and evidence. He thinks that'll stop it." Margaret's voice had been quiet, but sharp as a knife. "And if it doesn't, then we leave or we fight. I don't know how to do the second one." Rebecca had listened from the hallway, 15 years old, and understanding for the first time that her father's patience wasn't moral superiority or cowardice. It was calculation. Joseph Davis knew that fighting back meant escalation, meant drawing lines that might get someone hurt, meant risking everything they'd built for the satisfaction of punching back. He was choosing survival over satisfaction, and Rebecca wasn't sure if that was wisdom or surrender. The sabotage stopped after Gary's intervention, but the hostility didn't. By fall 1941, Rebecca could feel it everywhere. Teachers who used to be neutral became cold. Store clerks who used to be friendly became curt. People who used to nod hello on the street looked through the Davis family like they were ghosts. Then December 7th arrived and turned everything worse. Rebecca was in the barn when she heard the news, working on a jammed cultivator radio playing in the background. The regular program cut off mid-song, and the announcer's voice came through tight and shocked. The Japanese Empire had attacked Pearl Harbor. Hundreds, maybe thousands dead. The Pacific Fleet burning. Congress would declare war within hours. She'd run to the house to find her parents already listening. Joseph's face gray, Margaret gripping the counter like it was the only thing holding her up. They all knew what this meant. If war with Japan made Japanese-American farmers suspect, what did war with Germany make German-American ones? The FBI came to the farm 3 days later. 2 agents in dark suits, polite but thorough, searching the house for evidence of sedition or espionage or sympathy for the Reich. They looked through Joseph's books, confiscated the German-language agricultural manuals he'd brought from Bavaria because they might be coded communications. They asked Margaret if her husband ever spoke favorably about Hitler. They asked Rebecca if her father had ever said anything suspicious about America. The answer to all of it was no, and the agents couldn't find anything, because there was nothing to find, but the visit left a stain. Everyone in Parlier knew the FBI had searched the Davis farm. Everyone drew their own conclusions about what that meant. The town council meeting came in February 1942, and Joseph was required to attend. Rebecca went with him, sitting in the back of the room while council members debated whether properties owned by German nationals should be subject to special review for public safety purposes. The proposal was couched in careful language about wartime security, but everyone understood what it really meant. They wanted authority to seize farms owned by Germans and sell them to Americans who weren't tainted by enemy heritage. Donald Thompson led the charge. He owned Thompson Agricultural Supply, the largest dealership in the region, and he'd made money during the Depression buying distressed properties and flipping them. Now he was pushing the council to give him legal cover to do the same thing under the banner of patriotism. He stood at the podium, barrel-chested and loud, talking about how Germans in the valley were profiting while American boys died in Europe. How it wasn't right that enemy aliens owned land that real Americans should be farming. How the council had a responsibility to protect the community from potential saboteurs and sympathizers. Joseph sat silent through all of it, hands folded in his lap, face carved from stone. Rebecca wanted to scream, wanted to stand up and tell the room that her father had been farming that land for 18 years, that he'd made it productive when nobody else could, that he'd employed local workers and paid local tax and done everything a good citizen was supposed to do. But she was 16. Nobody would listen to a 16-year-old girl, especially not one with a German last name and a reputation for being too mannish to fit in. Gary Robinson stood instead. He'd served in the First War, had a Congressional Medal of Honor from Belleau Wood, and when he talked, people listened, even if they didn't like what he heard. I fought Germans in 1918, watched them kill my brother. I know what Germany did then, and I know what Germany's doing now. But Joseph Davis didn't do any of that. He farms, he pays his bills, he hires local workers and treats them fair. He's lived here 20 years and never caused a problem for anyone. This motion isn't about security. It's about giving certain people legal cover to steal land they couldn't buy honestly. I served my country once. I'll be damned if I watch it turn into the kind of place that punishes innocent people for where their parents were born. The room had gone silent. Several council members looked uncomfortable. Donald Thompson looked furious. The vote failed 7-6. The Davis farm was safe, at least from official seizure. But the damage was done. Everyone knew Thompson wanted their land. Everyone knew he'd found 6 council members willing to help him take it. Everyone knew that the only thing protecting the Davis family was the vote of people who might change their minds next month or next year. Joseph drove home in silence, Rebecca beside him, Margaret in the back seat staring out the window. Nobody spoke until they pulled into the farmyard, and Joseph finally turned off the engine. His voice had been barely above a whisper. I came here for opportunity, built something from nothing, did everything right, and it's still not enough, because I speak with an accent and my grandparents were born in the wrong country. Margaret had reached forward and gripped his shoulder. We're still here. They voted no. We're still here. For now. 6 weeks later, Joseph Davis was dead. He'd been working the South 40 turning soil in preparation for spring planting, running the tractor in long straight rows like he'd done 1,000 times before. Rebecca was in the barn working on equipment maintenance, and Margaret was in the house making lunch. Neither of them saw Joseph collapse. Gary Robinson saw. He'd been working his own property and happened to look over just as Joseph slumped forward over the tractor wheel, the machine rolling on without guidance until it hit the fence line and stalled. Gary had come running, climbed over the fence, reached Joseph, just as Rebecca came sprinting from the barn. Joseph's face was gray, his breathing shallow and labored, his left hand clutching his chest. Rebecca had never seen her father look helpless before, and the sight of it punched the air from her lungs. Gary sent her running for the doctor while he stayed with Joseph, trying to keep him conscious, talking to him in steady tones about nothing important, just words to anchor him to the present. The doctor's office was 4 miles away. Rebecca drove the farm truck faster than she'd ever driven anything, skidding into town and running into the doctor's waiting room, still covered in barn dust and motor oil. The doctor was with another patient. Rebecca didn't care. She yanked open the exam room door and said her father was dying and they needed to leave right now. The doctor came, but it took 40 minutes to get back to the farm, and by the time they arrived, Joseph Davis was already gone. He died with his hand in Gary Robinson's, talking about soil and spring planting, and how Rebecca needed to watch the irrigation in the south orchard because those trees were still young and temperamental. His last words were in German, so quiet, Gary almost didn't hear them. Der Boden kennt die Wahrheit. The soil knows the truth. Joseph Davis died at 46 years old. 7 weeks after the town council tried to seize his property, 3 months after the FBI searched his house, 2 years after neighbors started treating him like an enemy. He died owing nothing and owning 80 acres of the most productive farmland in the county, and he died without ever becoming an American citizen because the naturalization laws had excluded German immigrants during the years when he might have applied. The funeral was small. Margaret and Rebecca, Gary Robinson and his wife, Paul Jackson and his family, a few other farmers who'd known Joseph and respected his work even if they'd kept their distance during the war fever, the minister from the Catholic Church. Margaret attended, though Joseph had never been much for church. Donald Thompson sent flowers with a card that made Rebecca's hands shake when she read it. Deepest sympathies for your loss. If you need assistance managing the farm, please don't hesitate to contact Thompson Agricultural Supply. Margaret had thrown the card in the fire. Rebecca watched it burn and understood what it meant. Thompson thought they were finished now, thought that without Joseph, 2 women couldn't possibly keep the farm running, thought he could wait them out a few months and then make an offer when they were desperate. 3 weeks later, Rebecca needed replacement parts for the planter to finish spring planting. Margaret was too grief-stricken to leave the house too raw to face town and the pitying looks and the unspoken questions about what they'd do now. So Rebecca went alone. She walked into Thompson Agricultural Supply on a Saturday morning in April, the dealership crowded with farmers getting ready for planting season. Every head turned when she came through the door. 17 years old, 5'9", wearing work pants and a flannel shirt and boots, caked with field dirt, looking like her father, but female and young and alone. The parts counter man looked through her like she was made of glass. She waited while he helped 3 other customers, all men, all who'd arrived after her. Finally, she spoke up, voice steady, despite the flutter in her chest. I need a number 4 planter disc and 30 feet of irrigation hosing. The parts man glanced at Donald Thompson, who was near the back of the store, talking to another farmer. Thompson walked over, taking his time, making Rebecca wait, while everyone watched. Davis, the German farm. Rebecca forced her spine straight. My father was German. I'm American, born in Fresno County. I need parts. Thompson's voice carried across the entire dealership. Your father was an enemy alien who died owing people money. The lie landed like a slap. Rebecca felt heat flood her face but kept her voice level. My father didn't owe anyone. I have his books. Little girl, you can barely read those books. You definitely can't run a farm. I've been running that farm's equipment since I was 11. I can outwork most men in this room." Thompson leaned against the counter, smiling in a way that made Rebecca's skin crawl. "I don't care if you can outwork a mule. You're a female. Females don't own farms. They marry farmers. Farming takes a man's strength and a man's brain. Women are made for kitchens and nurseries, not tractors and ledgers." Someone in the crowd laughed. Rebecca's hands clenched into fists at her sides. "I have cash. I need parts. Are you selling or not?" Thompson's smile disappeared. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to sell that property to someone qualified. You're going to marry some boy who knows what he's doing. And you're going to stop embarrassing yourself pretending you can do work you're not built for. I will not sell equipment to a 17-year-old girl playing farmer. Get out of my store before I call your mother to come collect you like the child you are." The room had gone silent except for a few muttered agreements from the men standing nearby. Rebecca stood there for 10 seconds that felt like hours, every eye on her, every person waiting to see if she'd cry or yell or prove Thompson right about women being too emotional for business. She turned and walked out without another word, got in the truck, and drove 60 miles to the next town where a dealer sold her the parts without asking questions or making commentary on her gender. She drove back with those parts rattling in the truck bed and her face burning with humiliation and fury. Margaret was waiting when she got home, took one look at Rebecca's face, and asked what happened. Rebecca told her everything voice flat, while her mother's expression went from grief to rage to something harder and colder. "Then we don't need him. We never needed anyone who underestimates us. They planted that crop with parts from a dealer who didn't know their names and equipment, held together with wire and stubbornness. They hired 2 workers, both Italian immigrants, who couldn't get work elsewhere because of their own accents and associations. They worked 16-hour days through spring and into summer, while Parlia waited for them to fail. The vandalism started again in June. Someone broke into their locked barn and stole hand tools worth $80. A week later, 40% of their ready-to-harvest peach crop was trampled overnight, crushed into the dirt by boots and deliberate malice. The sheriff came, looked at the obvious footprints, and wrote it up as mischief. Gary Robinson showed up the next morning with a shotgun and a sleeping bag. "I'll be watching your property at night. This stops now." Joseph would have told him no, would have said it wasn't worth the risk, would have chosen survival over confrontation. But Joseph was dead, and Rebecca was discovering that she had less patience for turning the other cheek than her father had possessed. Paul Jackson started doing the same thing him and Gary, taking turns sleeping in trucks, positioned where they could watch the Davis property. The vandalism stopped, but the damage was done. They salvaged what crop they could, sold it at the Fresno market for less than it was worth, and ended the season with $240 in the bank. Margaret sat at the kitchen table in October 1942 and put 2 options on the table. "We can sell for $85 an acre and move to San Francisco. Start over where nobody knows us. Or we stay and prove them all wrong. But staying means years of this. Years of fighting for every inch. Years of being despised." Rebecca had looked at her mother across that table, both of them exhausted and grieving and angry, both of them old enough now to understand that the world didn't reward fairness or hard work as reliably as they'd been taught. Papa said the soil knows the truth. If we leave, the truth dies with us. Margaret had nodded slowly. Then we stay, and we make them watch us succeed. Winter 1944 brought decisions that couldn't be delayed any longer. The farm had survived 2 brutal seasons on stubbornness and scrap value equipment. But survival wasn't the same as success, and Margaret knew it. She spread their financial records across the kitchen table one January evening, the numbers stark and unforgiving. They had enough cash to make it through spring planting if nothing broke, and nobody got sick, and the weather cooperated perfectly. Or they could sell now for $85 an acre, take $36,000, and walk away before the valley finished grinding them down to nothing. Rebecca stared at those numbers until they blurred. 18 years old, legally an adult, now old enough to understand exactly what staying would cost. Years of 16-hour days, years of being the girl who thought she could farm, years of proving herself over and over to people who'd already decided she didn't belong. Margaret's voice cut through the silence, rough with exhaustion and something fiercer underneath. We can move to San Francisco, find work in the shipyards or the canneries, send you to secretarial school, build a life where nobody knows our name or cares where our family came from, and let Thompson win. Margaret's hand stilled on the papers. Is that what this is about? Beating Donald Thompson? Rebecca shook her head slowly. Papa used to say, the soil knows the truth. If we leave, who's left to prove the truth? Who's left to show that Joseph Davis built something real, something that mattered, something that wasn't just a lucky German's accident? The weight of that settled between them, heavy as fieldstone. They both understood what staying meant. Rebecca would be farming when other girls her age were getting married, starting families, living lives that fit into the shapes society had carved out for women. Margaret would be choosing hardship when she could choose comfort, choosing to be the widow who wouldn't accept her place. Margaret reached across the table and gripped Rebecca's hand, her calluses rough against Rebecca's matching ones. Then we stay, and we make your father's work mean something. February 1945 arrived with rain that turned the valley roads to soup and made field work impossible for 3 days running. Rebecca spent those days in the barn rebuilding a harrow that had finally given up completely, working by lamplight while rain hammered the roof and wind drove through gaps in the siding. The radio played news from Europe, the war grinding toward some conclusion nobody could quite predict yet. And Rebecca tried not to think about how many of the boys she'd gone to school with were over there fighting people who spoke the same language her father had spoken. The third afternoon smoke appeared over Gary Robinson's property, black and thick and wrong. Rebecca ran from the barn without thinking, crossed the property line at a sprint, and found Gary's main barn engulfed in flames that roared like living things. Gary was trying to get his horses out, 3 of them trapped in stalls at the far end where the fire hadn't reached yet but would soon. Rebecca grabbed wet blankets from Gary's well house and ran into the smoke without waiting for permission. The horses were screaming that high, terrible sound that horses make when they know they're about to die, and Rebecca wrapped her face in wet cloth and felt her way through smoke so thick she couldn't see her own hands. She found the first stall by touch, yanked the door open, and dragged the horse out by main force when it wouldn't move on its own. The animal fought her, terrified and irrational, but Rebecca was strong from farm work and desperate enough to match the horse's panic with her own fury at dying. She got all 3 horses out, and Gary got most of his equipment pulled clear before the roof collapsed in a shower of sparks and burning timber. They stood in the mud, watching the barn burn to its foundation, both of them coughing smoke and shaking from adrenaline. And Gary turned to look at Rebecca with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You saved my animals. Could have died doing it." Rebecca wiped soot from her face with a hand that left more soot behind. "Neighbors help neighbors. You taught me that." Gary's laugh was rough and surprised. "Your father said something like that once. Fixed my harvester when I couldn't afford to pay him. I have been trying to repay that debt for 5 years now." "You don't owe us anything. That's what Joseph said too. Stubborn runs in your family." They spent the next hour going through the barn ruins, looking for anything salvageable. And that's when Rebecca found the tractor. A 1934 Farmall F12, buried under fallen timber and covered in ash, looking like it had been parked in the back corner of the barn and forgotten. The fire had damaged the sheet metal and melted some rubber components, but the engine block was intact, the frame solid, the mechanics fundamentally sound under all the destruction. Gary looked at it and shook his head. "Haven't run in 8 years. Clutch seized, carburetor's shot, probably needs everything rebuilt. Was my father's tractor. Kept meaning to fix it, but never got around to it." Rebecca ran her hands over the engine and reading the damage like text. "Can I try?" "Try what?" "Fixing it. If I can get it running, can I keep it?" Gary studied her for a long moment. This 18-year-old girl covered in soot and barn mud, asking for permission to take on a mechanical project that would challenge most trained mechanics. "You think you can make that thing run? I'll have it working in 2 months." Gary's expression shifted into something that might have been respect. "If you can fix it, it's yours. Fair trade for 3 horses." Rebecca started work the next day. She stripped the tractor down to components in the Davis barn, laying out parts on canvas tarps and cataloging every piece that needed replacement or repair. The clutch was indeed seized, fused solid from years of sitting unused. The carburetor was corroded beyond saving. The electrical system was a disaster of frayed wires and corroded connections. The fuel lines were cracked. The oil pan had a crack that would need welding. Margaret came out to the barn that first evening and found Rebecca surrounded by tractor parts, making notes in a ledger about what could be salvaged and what needed to be sourced. Her mother stood in the doorway watching for a full minute before speaking. "Your father would have loved this. You breaking something down to understand it, then building it back better." Rebecca looked up from her notes. Grease already worked into the creases of her hands. "Think I can do it? I think you've never failed at anything mechanical you've attempted, but this is bigger than a harrow or a cultivator." Margaret moved closer, studying the disassembled engine with the eye of someone who'd learned machinery during her own years in a munitions factory. "I worked on bigger engines than this during the First War, made artillery components. If you need help, I remember more than you'd think." That became their pattern. Rebecca would work on the tractor after field work sometimes until midnight or later, and Margaret would join her when the bookkeeping was finished, the two of them rebuilding the Farmall piece by careful piece. They sourced parts from junkyards and equipment graveyards from farms, selling out and operations that had gone under. Rebecca fabricated what she couldn't find, machining replacement components on tools she borrowed from Paul Jackson's shop. Margaret handled the welding, her hands steady and sure despite years away from that kind of work. Some nights, they didn't talk at all, just worked in comfortable silence, broken only by the clink of tools and the hiss of the welding torch. Other nights they talked about Joseph, about the farm's future, about whether Rebecca would ever want something besides this endless cycle of planting and harvest and mechanical repair. Do you ever think about marriage, boys? Rebecca's hand stilled on the wrench she was holding. Sometimes. But most boys I know think farming is men's work. They want wives who'll keep house and have babies and not challenge them. And you want someone who sees me as a partner, not a project to fix or a problem to solve. Someone who respects what I'm building here. Margaret smiled, small and sad. Those men exist. They're just rare. Your father was one of them. 10 weeks after the barn fire, Rebecca finished the FarmLife rebuild. She'd replaced the clutch assembly, installed a salvaged carburetor she'd rebuilt herself, rewired the entire electrical system, patched the oil pan, replaced every gasket and seal, changed all the fluids, and painted over the worst of the fire damage with surplus green paint from the hardware store. The tractor looked rough but functional, a working machine instead of a showpiece. She primed the engine, set the choke, and cranked the starter on a Saturday morning in early May while Margaret watched from the barn door. The engine turned over once, twice, caught, coughed, died. Rebecca adjusted the fuel mixture and tried again. This time it caught and held, settling into a rough idle that smoothed out as the engine warmed. The sound echoed off the barn walls, that distinctive FarmLife rumble that meant power and possibility. Margaret walked over and put her hand on the hood, eyes closed, and Rebecca understood she was thinking about Joseph, about how proud he'd be, about how this moment, this victory over broken machinery and limited resources and everyone's low expectations was exactly the kind of thing Joseph Davis had lived for. That tractor meant more than transportation. It meant Rebecca could handle complexity, could solve problems other people walked away from, could take something destroyed and make it useful again. Every bolt she'd turned had been an argument against everyone who said women couldn't understand mechanics. Every part she'd fabricated had proven her brain could solve problems men's couldn't. The FarmLife was evidence, physical and undeniable. Spring 1946 brought opportunity wrapped in tragedy. The 40 acres adjacent to the Davis property went to auction after the owner died, intestate, with no heirs willing to take over the farm. The land was good, better than the original 80 acres Joseph had bought, with established irrigation and decent soil that wouldn't need the intensive remediation the Davis property had required. Fair market value was probably $25 an acre, maybe $30. Rebecca had $670 saved, every penny she and Margaret had managed to scrape together over 2 years of brutal economy. She knew Donald Thompson would be at the auction, knew he'd been waiting for adjacent properties to become available, knew he'd see this as another step toward eventually acquiring the Davis farm by surrounding it. The auction happened on a Saturday morning in the county clerk's office. A dozen bidders crowded into a room too small for the tension. Thompson was there in expensive boots and a bolo tie, looking prosperous and confident. He nodded at Rebecca when she walked in, the gesture dismissive, like he was acknowledging a child at an adult event. The auctioneer started bidding at $15 per acre, and it climbed quickly. Rebecca stayed quiet through the early rounds, watching Thompson bid against two other farmers who dropped out at $18 and $20, respectively. When the bid hit $22, Thompson looked around the room to see who else was still competing. Rebecca raised her hand. $23 per acre, $805 total for the 35 acres, which was more than she had. But she'd figured out that she could sell some equipment if she won and make up the difference. Thompson's head snapped around, his eyes narrowing when he saw her. $24. $25. The room had gone silent now, everyone watching this contest between the teenage girl and the established dealer. Thompson's face was reddening, veins standing out at his temples. 26. Rebecca did the math in her head. $910. She'd have to sell nearly everything they owned to cover that, and they'd have no equipment left to work the land. She couldn't go higher. Thompson knew it too, was already starting to smile. Going once at $26 per acre. Going twice. Rebecca's voice cut across the auctioneer's rhythm. $27. Thompson exploded upright from his chair. That's ridiculous. She doesn't have that kind of money. This is a waste of everyone's time. The auctioneer's gavel cracked down hard. Sir, sit down or leave. Miss Davis, do you have $27 per acre? Rebecca met Thompson's furious stare without flinching. $945. She'd need to sell the old harrow, the cultivator they weren't using anymore, maybe some hand tools. She'd have to borrow from Gary or Paul. She'd have to figure it out. I can pay. Thompson's voice dropped to something ugly and personal. You can't farm 35 additional acres. You can barely manage what you have. This is spite, not business. You're going to destroy that land just to keep it from me. The room waited for Rebecca's response. She could feel every eye on her, every person wondering if Thompson was right, if this was just a girl's tantrum instead of a legitimate business decision. Her voice came out level and cold. I'm buying productive land at fair market value with money I earned. That's called farming. If you can't afford to outbid me, that's your problem, not mine. Sold to Rebecca Davis for $27 per acre. Thompson stormed out of the clerk's office without looking back, and Rebecca stood there shaking so hard she had to grip the edge of a desk to stay upright. She'd just committed to spending money she didn't have on land she wasn't sure she could work out of pure stubborn refusal to let Donald Thompson win. Margaret helped her figure out the financing. They sold equipment they could replace, later borrowed $200 from Gary Robinson at no interest, took an advance from their crop buyer against the fall harvest. By planting season, they owned 115 acres instead of 80, and they owned it free and clear, even if they didn't own much else. The next 3 years established a pattern that would define Rebecca's entire approach to farming. Work harder than everyone else. Innovate where others relied on tradition. Accept no debt that could give someone leverage over her choices. Build slowly, but build permanently. She hired Shirley Miller in the spring of 1947, a decision that raised eyebrows throughout the valley. Shirley was 38, a war widow with 3 children and no prospects. Her husband had died at Normandy in 1944, and the government pension wasn't enough to keep 4 people fed and housed. She'd been doing laundry and cleaning houses, but the work was irregular and the pay worse. Rebecca offered her the foreman position. Housing included salary paid weekly, and her kids could help with light work during harvest season for additional pay. Shirley had stared at her like Rebecca had spoken a foreign language. You want me to manage your workers? I've never farmed in my life. You've managed 3 children through a war and the death of their father. You know how to organize people and solve problems under pressure. I can teach you farming. I can't teach reliability and judgment, and you have both. Shirley became the best hiring decision Rebecca ever made. She understood workers in ways Rebecca didn't know how to motivate without bullying, how to maintain discipline without creating resentment. She could look at a crew of 10 men and know immediately who was actually working and who was coasting. She could diffuse conflicts before they became problems. And she didn't care that her boss was a woman barely out of her teens, because Shirley had learned the hard way that competence mattered more than convention. Her daughter Laura started helping during summers, a serious 14-year-old who absorbed farming knowledge like she was memorizing scripture. Rebecca taught her irrigation management and equipment maintenance, and Laura taught Rebecca things she'd never considered, like how to keep morale up during brutal harvest weeks and how to make workers feel valued instead of used. The Davis operation expanded steadily. Rebecca subscribed to agricultural journals, corresponded with researchers at UC Davis, implemented techniques other farmers considered experimental or impractical. She tested soil composition in different fields and adjusted her planting accordingly. She experimented with cover crops to rebuild nitrogen. She installed windbreaks to reduce erosion. She kept meticulous records of yields and weather and costs, analyzing the data to find inefficiencies. The researchers at UC Davis assumed R. Davis was male, and their letters were detailed and technical in ways they probably wouldn't have been if they'd known they were corresponding with a woman. When Professor Robert Williams finally visited the farm in 1949, he spent 20 minutes looking for the owner before realizing the young woman showing him around wasn't hired help. "You're R. Davis, the one who's been writing about precision pruning techniques." Rebecca had gotten used to that reaction. "Is there a problem with my letters?" "No, they're excellent, exceptionally well-reasoned. His voice trailed off as he realized there was no way to finish that sentence without admitting he'd assumed her gender based on competence. "You assumed I was a man because the work was good. I get that a lot." Professor Williams had the grace to look embarrassed. "I apologize. That was prejudice speaking, not science. Science doesn't care about prejudice. Neither does soil. That's what makes farming honest." January 1949 brought cold that nobody in the valley had experienced before. The temperature dropped to 18 degrees Fahrenheit and stayed there for 3 days, a cold snap that threatened every stone fruit tree in the region. Peaches could survive cold, but not sustained freezing at that intensity, not during dormancy when the trees were vulnerable. Rebecca understood they were going to lose everything if she didn't act immediately. The solution was old technology, nearly obsolete, something most modern farmers had stopped using. Smudge pots and wind machines creating artificial warmth through controlled burning and air circulation. It was labor-intensive and expensive and dangerous, but it was the only option. She positioned 40 smudge pots throughout the orchard, filled them with diesel fuel, and lit them at dusk on the first freezing night. The smoke rolled thick and black across the farm, turning the air toxic and visibility near zero. The wind machines ran on gasoline generators that screamed through the darkness, circulating the warm air from the smudge pots to prevent cold pockets from forming. Rebecca worked 72 hours straight, moving between smudge pots to keep them burning, monitoring temperatures with a thermometer. She checked every 30 minutes, adjusting the wind machines when patterns shifted. Shirley worked alongside her, both of them wrapped in so many layers they could barely move, faces covered with cloth against the smoke, working through exhaustion that made simple tasks feel impossible. Gary Robinson came over on the second night without being asked. He took over the smudge pot rotation so Rebecca could manage the wind machines, working side by side with her through hours so cold the diesel fuel started to gel and had to be kept near fires to stay liquid. They worked without talking much, just the companionable silence of people who understood hard work and necessity. By hour 60, Rebecca was hallucinating from exhaustion. She kept seeing her father in the smoke, kept hearing his voice telling her to check the south orchard, kept turning to respond before remembering he was 7 years dead. Gary found her sitting against a tree trunk at hour 62, shaking so hard from cold and fatigue that she couldn't stand up on her own. His hands gripped her shoulders, rough but grounding. "Rebecca, you need to rest. I'll handle the next shift. The trees, South Orchard needs checking. I'll check them. You're going to collapse and freeze to death if you don't get inside." Rebecca let him half carry her to the house, where Margaret wrapped her in blankets and forced hot coffee into her hands. She slept 4 hours, woke before dawn, and went back out to relieve Gary, who'd kept the smudge pots burning and the wind machines running through her absence. By the time the cold snap broke on the 4th day, Rebecca had saved 85% of her crop. The rest of the valley lost 70 to 90%. Farms that had laughed at smudge pots and called the technique outdated were now looking at financial ruin. The Davis operation would have its best year yet, selling into a market where stone fruit was suddenly scarce and valuable. Whispers changed after that freeze, stopped being about the girl playing farmer, and started being about the Davis operation's innovative approach to risk management. Still skeptical, still waiting for Rebecca to fail, but no longer quite so certain it was inevitable. The county fair that September felt like validation and challenge combined. Rebecca had never entered the commercial agriculture division before, had always assumed the judges would hold her gender against her regardless of product quality. But Shirley had pushed her to enter, argued that hiding competence didn't serve anyone. "What's the worst that happens? They don't give you a ribbon. You've survived worse than that." Rebecca entered 6 peaches in the commercial stone fruit category, the first woman to compete outside the traditional women's preserves and baking competitions. The judging was blind, just numbered entries with no names attached, and the judges spent 20 minutes examining fruit quality, taste, size, and color before making their selections. When the results were announced at the evening awards ceremony, Rebecca sat in the audience wearing a dress that felt strange after years of farm clothes, her hair pulled back in a style Margaret had insisted on. The announcer read through smaller categories, first building tension, until finally he reached the main commercial divisions. Commercial Stone Fruit Grand Champion, entry number 47, R. Davis. The pause that followed was painful in its length. Rebecca stood feeling every eye in the tent track, her movement, hearing the murmurs ripple through the crowd as people registered that R. Davis was a woman. The walk to the stage felt endless, her boots loud on the wooden platform, her face burning under scrutiny. The announcer recovered his composure quickly. Professional smile back in place. "Miss Rebecca Davis of Davis Farm, congratulations." Rebecca took the trophy, heavy in her hands, and faced an audience that was half applauding and half silent. She could see Donald Thompson in the back, his face red and furious, could see the county agricultural commissioner looking uncomfortable, like he wanted to check the rules to see if women were technically allowed to win. Could see Shirley and Margaret and Gary and Paul clapping hard enough to hurt their hands. The microphone was there, the expectation that she'd say something. Rebecca gripped the trophy and made her voice carry to the back of the tent. "My father Joseph taught me that land doesn't care about your last name, your gender, or your age. Land cares about work. I work." The applause that followed was louder, but still not universal. Half the tent standing, half sitting in stony disapproval. Rebecca walked off that stage with her trophy and understood she'd just made herself more visible, more vulnerable to criticism, more of a target for anyone who wanted to prove that women didn't belong in commercial agriculture. Margaret hugged her outside the tent, fierce and proud. "Your father would have put that trophy on the mantel and pointed at it every single day." The trophy did go on the mantel, and Rebecca did point at it, but not out of pride. It became a reminder that visibility brought both opportunity and danger. 4 days after the fair, the phone started ringing. Farmers wanted advice, quietly often prefacing their requests with disclaimers about how they normally wouldn't ask a woman, but they'd heard about her freeze management or her pruning techniques or her soil testing program. Rebecca started consulting on the side, charging modest fees that added steady income beyond crop sales. Some clients were embarrassed to be seen taking advice from her. Others didn't care about optics as long as their yields improved. One farmer called in 1951 and offered to pay triple her normal rate if she'd send a male consultant instead of coming herself. His voice on the phone was apologetic, but firm, like he was asking for a reasonable accommodation. Rebecca's response was ice cold. "I don't have male consultants. You can learn from me, or you can keep failing on your own. Those are your options." He hired her. His yields increased 30% in 2 years. He still wouldn't acknowledge her in public, but his checks cleared and his crops proved the value of what she knew. Spring 1951 brought Paul Jackson's death sudden and shocking despite his age. Heart attack while working, his fields gone before the doctor could arrive, leaving his widow Laura with 140 acres she didn't want to manage alone. Laura called Rebecca the day after the funeral. "I want you to have the land. Paul always said you were the only farmer in the valley who understood what Joseph Davis had built. He'd want the property to stay productive, and you're the one who can do that." The price was fair market value, $16,800. Rebecca had $4,200 in savings, enough for a quarter of what she needed, nowhere near enough to close the deal. She drove to First National Bank with her account statements and profit records and a business plan she'd stayed up all night writing. The loan officer listened to her pitch with a carefully neutral expression, examined her paperwork with professional thoroughness, and then leaned back in his chair with something that looked like genuine regret. "Miss Davis, your operation is impressive. Your track record speaks for itself. But bank policy prohibits unmarried women from borrowing without a male co-signer. I can't approve this loan without your father, brother, or husband's signature." Rebecca kept her voice level despite the rage building behind her ribs. "I own 115 acres, free and clear. 5-year profit history with improving margins, perfect payment record on all equipment and supplies. What part of that suggests I'm a credit risk? It's not about risk, it's about policy. Bank ownership requires certain safeguards. Women's legal status makes loans more complicated if there's a default. We need assurance that someone with full legal standing is backing the debt. My father is dead. I have no brothers. I'm not married. The loan officer spread his hands in a gesture meant to convey sympathy, but coming across as dismissal. Then I can't help you. I'm sorry. Rebecca walked out of that bank with her paperwork and her fury, and no idea how to solve a problem that couldn't be fixed through hard work or innovation. The injustice of it burned like acid. She'd proven herself more capable than most male farmers in the valley, but capability didn't matter when the rules were written to exclude her regardless of merit. She was halfway to her truck when a voice called from behind, "Miss Davis? Wait!" The man approaching was maybe 32, wearing a bank clerk's suit, but walking with the easy confidence of someone used to outdoor work. His face was familiar in the vague way that people who lived in the same county for years became familiar without ever actually meeting. "Kenneth Wright. I work in the lending office. Heard your conversation just now." Rebecca's shoulders tensed. "If you're here to explain why the policy makes sense, save your breath." Kenneth's laugh was short and bitter. "That policy is discriminatory nonsense designed to keep women dependent on men. I'm here to help you get around it." He explained quickly, conscious they were standing in the bank parking lot where anyone might overhear. He'd co-signed the loan for a flat fee of $200 payable over 5 years at no interest. Rebecca would make all the payments directly to the bank. His name on the paperwork would be pure formality, nothing more than a signature to satisfy policy requirements. Rebecca studied him with deep suspicion. "Why would you help me?" Kenneth's expression shifted into something harder, older. "I fought in Europe, spent time in Germany after the surrender. Met farmers there, men and women both working land that had been bombed to hell and back. They taught us how to grow food in impossible conditions, how to make soil productive when it should have been dead. Some of those farmers were women running operations alone because their men were dead or missing. They were as competent as any farmer I've ever met. Your father's techniques, the things you've written about in the Aggie journals, they're similar to what those German farmers taught us. I owe them. This is how I pay that debt." The loan went through with Kenneth's signature. Rebecca bought the Jackson property and added 140 acres to her operation, bringing the total to 255 acres of productive land owned free and clear, except for one loan she was determined to pay off in 4 years instead of 10. Kenneth Wright stopped being just a bank clerk after that. He started showing up at the farm with questions about crop yields and irrigation efficiency questions that sounded like professional interest, but felt like something more personal. Rebecca answered them because she answered all questions honestly, and because Kenneth asked good questions that showed genuine understanding of agricultural complexity. The conversations became coffee in town, then dinners at the diner, where they could talk about farming and finance and the war without anyone finding it remarkable. Kenneth never tried to advise Rebecca on how to run her operation, never suggested improvements or corrections, never acted like his co-signature on a loan meant he had any authority over her decisions. What he did was listen, asked about her father, about growing up on a farm during Depression and war, about what it felt like to be constantly proving herself to people who'd already decided she couldn't succeed. And he talked about Germany, about the farmers he'd met, about watching people rebuild from absolute destruction with nothing but will and knowledge. I watched a woman in Bavaria restart her farm with 1 horse and hand tools. No tractor, no equipment, no male relatives to help. She produced enough food to feed her family and sell surplus within 2 years. When I asked her how, she said something I've never forgotten. The land remembers how to grow. You just have to remember how to work. That sounds like something my father would have said. Kenneth's smile was soft and sad. Good farmers think the same way, regardless of what country they're from. Land teaches the same lessons everywhere. They married in May 1954, a quiet ceremony with Margaret and Gary and Shirley and a handful of friends. Rebecca was 28, old enough that people had started calling her a spinster, young enough that her mother had harbored quiet hopes she'd find someone eventually. Kenneth was 35, a veteran who'd come back from war, understanding that the rules people lived by weren't as important as the character underneath. The marriage didn't change the farm's name. It stayed Davis Farm, not Wright Farm, because the operation was Rebecca's inheritance and her future, and Kenneth understood that without needing explanation. He kept his bank job, helped with bookkeeping in the evenings, never interfered with operational decisions. When people asked if he farmed, he'd smile and shake his head. "My wife farms. I just try to keep up with her paperwork." Margaret had approved quietly, watching Kenneth help with dinner one evening without being asked, noticing how he deferred to Rebecca's judgment on farm matters while offering his own expertise in areas where it was relevant. He respects what you built. That's rare. That's love. The years between 1952 and 1955 established the Davis operation as one of the most productive in the county. 255 acres producing yields that made agricultural journals send photographers and reporters. Rebecca was featured in Progressive Farmer magazine in 1954, a full-page article titled "California's Female Farming Pioneer Defies Conventions." The article quoted her extensively, and one line in particular got repeated in papers across the state. Convention said, "I couldn't farm." Convention was wrong about a lot of things. Letters arrived after that article, some supportive and some hostile. Women wrote thanking her for proving it could be done, asking for advice on starting their own operations. Men wrote telling her she was destroying the natural order, that women farming would lead to social collapse, that she should be ashamed of herself for not knowing her place. Rebecca threw the hostile letters away without responding and answered every supportive one, personally, often staying up late after fieldwork to write detailed advice about equipment and soil management and how to handle discrimination from suppliers and lenders. Spring 1955 brought another test, this one mechanical rather than social. Rebecca needed a new cultivator, and Thompson Agricultural Supply was still the only dealer within reasonable distance. She'd avoided the place for 13 years, buying from dealers farther away, or at auctions, or through mail order, anything to avoid giving Donald Thompson her business. Kenneth offered to go instead. "I can handle a parts transaction. You don't need to put yourself through that." Rebecca shook her head, already reaching for her truck keys. "I need to face it. Been putting this off for 13 years. Time to prove I'm not afraid of him anymore." The dealership hadn't changed much. Same layout, same parts, counter, same smell of machine oil and welding smoke. Donald Thompson was at the counter talking to a customer, gray now, and heavier than he'd been in 1942, but still carrying himself like he owned the world and everyone in it. He recognized Rebecca immediately, his face tightening into something between anger and satisfaction. "Well, the Davis girl. Heard you got married. Surprised you're still playing at farming instead of doing something useful." Rebecca walked to the counter and set down a cashier's check for $2,850. 1955 Farmall 400 cultivator. Cash payment today. Thompson's eyes narrowed at the amount. That's 3 months' income for a real farm. How are you affording equipment like that? By farming 255 acres profitably. Are you selling equipment or not? Before Thompson could respond, a younger man stepped in from the back office. Mid-30s, Thompson's build and coloring, clearly his son. Stephen Thompson had been working stockroom in 1942 when Rebecca got thrown out, had been 16 years old and too afraid of his father to speak up. Now he was older, and something in his expression suggested he remembered. "Dad, I'll handle this transaction. Why don't you take lunch?" Thompson started to argue, but Stephen's voice cut across him with unexpected steel. "Dad, lunch, now." The older Thompson left with visible reluctance, and Stephen turned to Rebecca with an expression caught between apology and professional courtesy. "I apologize for my father's behavior. I read the Progressive Farmer article about your operation. 255 acres is impressive by any standard." Rebecca studied him carefully, looking for the trap. "You're willing to sell to me? You're a customer with cash. I'd be an idiot not to sell to you. Your father wouldn't." Stephen's jaw tightened. "My father is wrong about a lot of things. I've spent my adult life watching him make decisions based on prejudice instead of business sense. I won't continue his mistakes." As Rebecca waited for the paperwork, Stephen spoke quietly, almost too low to hear. "I was in the stockroom in 1942. I heard what my father said to you. I was 16 and too scared to speak up. I've regretted that silence for 13 years. Rebecca signed the purchase order and met his eyes directly. "You're speaking up now. That's what matters." Driving home with the cultivator towed behind her truck, Rebecca felt something shift that had been locked tight since 1942. Not forgiveness exactly, but a recognition that time moved in different directions for different people. Donald Thompson would die bitter and convinced he'd been right about everything. Stephen Thompson had chosen to be better than his father. That was progress, however, incomplete. Summer 1955 brought drought that lasted into 1956, the worst water shortage in 30 years. The valley's allocation was cut 65%, and farms started failing within months. Operations that had survived the Depression and the war couldn't survive. Lack of water and land started selling cheap to developers who'd been waiting for exactly this kind of crisis. Rebecca's solution was expensive and risky. Drill a deep well 400 feet down to the aquifer that sat under the valley floor. The drilling would cost $3,800 money they'd saved for expansion money they might need if the drought lasted longer than anyone predicted. But without water, the crops would fail, and the investment wouldn't matter anyway. The well came in at 380 feet, and the water was clean and cold and abundant. Combined with the efficient irrigation system Rebecca had installed over the years, the Davis operation could survive the drought at reduced but manageable capacity. Most of their neighbors couldn't. Gary Robinson's farm struggled despite his best efforts. He was 74 now, slowed by age and arthritis, working land that needed more care than he could provide with reduced water and failing equipment. Rebecca started showing up at his property in the evenings, helping with irrigation management and equipment repair, working alongside him like she'd done during the freeze of 1949. Gary tried to refuse the help at first. "You've got your own operation to run. Can't afford to spend time on mine. You gave me my first tractor when I had nothing. This is compound interest." The drought broke in late 1956, but the damage was done. Farms throughout the valley had gone under, selling to developers or corporations or wealthy buyers from the cities who saw agriculture as investment rather than livelihood. The landscape was changing, small family operations giving way to larger consolidated holdings. Margaret Davis died that same year, peacefully in her sleep at age 56. Heart failure, the doctor said, probably congenital, but undiagnosed until it was too late. She went to bed one October evening and simply didn't wake up passing without pain or struggle or any of the suffering that so often accompanied death. Rebecca found her in the morning and sat beside the bed for an hour before calling anyone, holding her mother's cooling hand and trying to understand a world where Margaret Wilson Davis no longer existed. The woman who'd chosen hardship over comfort, who'd rebuilt a farm from nothing, who'd proved that stubbornness and competence could substitute for almost everything else. Margaret's last words to Rebecca had been spoken 3 days before during an evening when they'd been reviewing accounts and planning next year's crop rotation. "Your father would say you proved the soil right. That character and work matter more than what people expect from you." The funeral was larger than Joseph's had been a reflection of how much the Davis operation had grown and how many people Margaret had touched. Farmers who'd bought produce from her, workers who'd been treated fairly when other employers weren't fair, women who'd watched Margaret and Rebecca prove that farming wasn't exclusively male territory. Rebecca planted a memorial rose garden that winter. German roses imported from Bavaria, the same variety that grew in the village where Joseph had been born. She planted them in careful rows behind the farmhouse, tended them with the same precision she applied to commercial crops, and used them as a place to think when the weight of running 255 acres alone became too heavy. Kenneth found her there one evening in early 1957, sitting among the roses in fading light. He didn't ask if she was okay, didn't offer platitudes about time healing wounds. He just sat beside her and waited until she was ready to talk. "I keep thinking about what she said, that my father would say I proved the soil right. But I don't know if that's true. I proved I could farm. I haven't proved I can build something that lasts beyond me." Kenneth's hand found hers in the dim light. "You're 31. You have time to build whatever legacy you want." Rebecca looked at the roses at the farmhouse her father built, at the fields that had sustained 3 generations of Davis family stubbornness. Time to build. Time to prove that Joseph and Margaret's work meant something beyond survival. Time to create something that would outlast them all. Spring 1957 brought Rebecca face to face with a choice that would define the next decade. The 180 acres adjacent to her eastern boundary went up for sale, good land with established orchards and a seller willing to negotiate. $24,000 was the asking price, and Rebecca had $12,000 in savings after paying off the Jackson property loan early. She could stretch her resources to make it work, or she could stay cautious and let someone else expand while she maintained what she already controlled. Kenneth spread the financial projections across their kitchen table one evening. Numbers showing what that expansion would mean for cash flow and risk exposure. His finger traced down the columns with banker's precision. "You can afford it if nothing goes wrong for 3 years, No major equipment failures, no crop losses, no market crashes. That's a lot of ifs. Rebecca studied the numbers and thought about her father buying worthless land because he saw potential nobody else recognized. Everything I've built has been a lot of ifs. This one's just bigger. She bought the property with a handshake deal and cash payment, bringing the Davis operation to 435 acres of productive land spanning 3 formerly separate farms. The valley noticed. Whispers shifted from skepticism about whether a woman could farm to speculation about how far she'd expand before overextending herself. The answer came 3 years later when Gary Robinson decided retirement at 78 was overdue. His 180 acres bordered Rebecca's northern edge land he'd worked for 45 years and protected from developers who'd been circling since the drought ended. He called Rebecca to his house on a Tuesday afternoon in March 1960, sitting in the same living room where he'd once kept watch over Davis property with a shotgun across his lap. "I'm selling to you at 20% below market. Don't argue with me about it. Your father helped me when I had nothing to pay him with. This closes that account." Rebecca tried to protest the discount, but Gary's hand came up sharp and final. "Joseph Davis fixed my equipment for free in 1940. Gave me advice that saved my operation 3 different times. You pulled my horses from a burning barn and rebuilt a tractor I'd given up on. The only way I can repay all that is to make sure this land stays in hands that'll respect it. Your hands." The purchase brought the Davis operation to 615 acres, one of the largest single-family holdings in the county. Rebecca was 34 years old and running an empire built on refusal to accept limitations other people wanted to impose. Gary died in 1965 at age 83, sitting in a chair on his porch overlooking land that was no longer his, but knowing it was in capable hands. His will left Rebecca $5,000 with a note attached in shaky handwriting for the next generation. Build something that lasts. That money sat in a bank account earning interest while Rebecca figured out what building for the next generation actually meant. She had land and equipment and a profitable operation, but legacy required more than accumulation. It required intention. The adoption happened in 1961 after 3 years of trying for biological children and accepting that biology wasn't going to cooperate. Catherine arrived as an infant through an agency in Fresno, a healthy baby girl whose mother couldn't keep her and whose future was otherwise uncertain. Some neighbors whispered about why Rebecca and Kenneth would adopt instead of trying harder for their own child, as if adopted children were second-choice alternatives rather than deliberate family. Rebecca ignored the whispers the same way she'd ignored everything else that didn't serve her purposes. Catherine was theirs, loved fiercely from the moment Rebecca held her, raised to understand that family was built through choice as much as blood. The girl grew up in fields and barns, learning to walk between crop rows, absorbing agricultural knowledge like it was her native language. By age 5, she could identify plant diseases by sight. By 7, she was helping with harvest tallies. By 10, she was asking questions about soil composition that made Kenneth laugh and shake his head in wonder. She gets that from you. That need to understand how things work at the foundational level. Rebecca watched Catherine examine a diseased peach tree with scientific intensity and felt something shift in how she thought about the farm's future. Legacy wasn't just about maintaining what Joseph had started, it was about creating opportunities for the next generation to build something even larger. The consulting business expanded through the 1960s as Rebecca's reputation spread beyond the immediate valley. Farmers from 3 counties away would call asking for advice on water management, or pest control, or crop rotation, willing to pay premium rates for knowledge that came from decades of practical application rather than academic theory. Rebecca charged fairly but not cheaply, understanding that undervaluing her expertise would undermine every woman farmer who came after. Some clients still preferred discretion. A farmer from Madeira called in 1962 offering to pay triple her normal consulting fee if she'd conduct the assessment quietly without anyone knowing he'd hired a woman. Rebecca's response was the same it had always been. My expertise doesn't work better if nobody knows you bought it. Hire me publicly or figure it out yourself. He hired her publicly. His yields improved 40% in 18 months. Other farmers in his area started calling after that reputation building on demonstrated results rather than gender politics. Technology adoption became another area where Rebecca led while others followed. She installed the valley's first commercially viable drip irrigation system in 1966, an expensive gamble on technology. Most farmers considered impractical for large-scale operations. The system cost $8,000 and required complete redesign of water delivery infrastructure, but it cut water usage by 30% while improving crop yields through precise nutrient delivery. UC Davis sent agricultural engineering students to study the installation, and Rebecca spent 3 days showing them how the system worked while they took notes and photographs. One student, a young man with academic confidence and practical inexperience, asked when they'd meet the owner who'd designed the system. "You're looking at her." The student's face had gone through several expressions before settling on embarrassment. "I'm sorry, I thought the complexity of the engineering suggested a man designed it. You thought wrong. Assumptions like that are why you're still a student, and I'm running 600 acres profitably." By 1968, Rebecca owned 720 acres through one final acquisition at auction, a 105-acre parcel that filled in gaps between her existing holdings. The operation employed 38 full-time workers year-round, paid them above market rates, and provided housing that other farms didn't bother with. Shirley Miller had been foreman for 21 years, her daughter Laura now managing harvest operations with the kind of efficiency that came from growing up understanding agriculture as both business and craft. The Davis farm annual revenue hit $1.6 million in 1970, a number that made Kenneth shake his head when he finished the year-end accounting. You've built something your father couldn't have imagined. 720 acres producing at levels that would make research stations jealous. Rebecca thought about Joseph standing in a ruined orchard in 1942, telling her the dirt was enough. He imagined it. He just didn't live to see it. Then came summer 1973, and the certified letter that proved some people would rather steal than compete. The foreclosure notice arrived on Tuesday, and by Wednesday, Rebecca's attorney had confirmed what she already suspected. Someone had filed fraudulent lien documents claiming she owed First National Bank $180,000 secured by her property. The paperwork looked legitimate enough for a cursory inspection signatures close enough to Rebecca's to pass unless examined by an expert notary, seal fake, but professionally done. Her attorney's voice had been tight with controlled fury on the phone. This is sophisticated fraud designed to force a quick auction before you can challenge it. Someone spent real money setting this up. Rebecca knew who. Knew it the way you know storms coming from the feel of air pressure dropping. Donald Thompson had spent 31 years watching her succeed at everything he'd said she couldn't do, and now he was trying different tactics. If he couldn't beat her through legitimate competition, he'd use the legal system to take what he couldn't earn. The investigation confirmed it within a week. Thompson Development Company, a subsidiary of Thompson Agricultural Supply, was listed as the creditor on the fraudulent liens. The same company had successfully used similar tactics against 6 smaller farms over the past decade, forcing auctions and buying properties at 40% of market value through shell companies that obscured Thompson's involvement. Those farmers hadn't had resources to fight. Rebecca did. The legal battle consumed September and October depositions and document analysis and forensic accounting to prove what everyone involved already knew. The signatures were forgeries. The notary was fake. The debt never existed. But proving it in court required evidence that would satisfy a judge, and that meant hiring experts and filing motions and building a case that couldn't be dismissed on technicalities. Donald Thompson's attorneys tried every delay tactic available, arguing that Rebecca's challenge was procedurally flawed, that she'd missed filing deadlines, that the court lacked jurisdiction. Anything to run out the clock until the scheduled auction date made the legal questions moot. Rebecca's attorney countered with emergency motions and preliminary injunctions, fighting to stop the auction while they built their fraud case. The hearing was scheduled for October 15th in County Superior Court, 10 days before the auction. Thompson was counting on to finalize his theft. Rebecca sat in the courtroom wearing a business suit. Kenneth had insisted on her hands folded in her lap to hide their shaking. Watching Thompson's legal team arrange their files with the confidence of people who'd done this before and won. Donald Thompson himself sat in the gallery, 78 years old, now gray and heavy, but still carrying himself like victory was inevitable. He'd looked at Rebecca when she entered, that same dismissive glance he'd given her in 1942, like she was a problem soon to be solved. The judge was a woman, which Rebecca took as potential advantage, until she remembered that female judges could be just as skeptical of other women as any man. Judge Patricia Anderson had a reputation for strict procedural adherence and zero tolerance for wasting the court's time. She'd read through both sides' briefs before the hearing, and her face gave away nothing about which argument she found more compelling. Thompson's attorney spoke first, laying out why the foreclosure should proceed despite Rebecca's challenge. The liens were properly filed according to county records. The debt was documented. Rebecca had been notified according to legal requirements. Her challenge was a delay tactic by a borrower trying to avoid legitimate obligations. The argument was smooth and professional and completely devoid of truth, but it sounded convincing if you didn't know the underlying facts. Rebecca's attorney countered with forensic evidence, handwriting analysis showing the signatures didn't match Rebecca's established samples. Investigation revealing the notary listed on the documents had never existed. Bank records proving Rebecca had never borrowed money against her property after paying off the Jackson loan in 1955. title search showing no legitimate liens filed against the Davis property. Judge Anderson listened without visible reaction, taking notes occasionally, asking clarifying questions that suggested she understood exactly what was happening but needed the legal record to support what her instincts already told her. When the attorneys finished, she called Rebecca to testify. The walk to the witness stand felt endless, every eye in the courtroom tracking her movement. Thompson watching with barely concealed anticipation of watching her credibility collapse under cross-examination. The oath, the seat, the judge's eyes meeting hers with professional assessment. Mrs. Wright, did you borrow $180,000 from anyone at any time? Rebecca's voice came out steady, despite her pulse hammering against her ribs. No, Your Honor, I've never borrowed against my land. My father taught me to own what I have. I paid cash for every acre. Do you know who would benefit from this foreclosure? Yes, Donald Thompson's development company is the listed creditor. The same Donald Thompson who told me in 1942 that women can't farm, that I should sell my land and get married. He's been waiting 31 years to take what I built. Thompson's attorney objected, calling the statement prejudicial and irrelevant. Judge Anderson sustained the objection, but her eyes had shifted to Thompson in the gallery assessment, turning cold and sharp. The cross-examination tried to suggest Rebecca might have forgotten borrowing the money, might have signed documents without reading them, might have delegated financial decisions to her husband, who could have taken out loans without her knowledge. Every question was designed to paint her as either dishonest or incompetent, a woman who didn't really understand her own business. Rebecca answered each question with calm precision, citing specific dates and transactions from memory, referencing account numbers and payment records, demonstrating knowledge of her operations' finances that made the suggestion of forgotten debts absurd. When Thompson's attorney suggested Kenneth might have borrowed without her knowledge, Rebecca's response was ice. My husband handles bookkeeping. I handle operations. We both handle major financial decisions together, and neither of us has borrowed money against this property in 18 years. These liens are fraudulent, designed to steal land through legal manipulation, because Donald Thompson can't acquire it honestly. Thompson himself stood in the gallery, his face purple with rage. That's a lie. She's making this up because she... Judge Anderson's gavel cracked down hard enough to echo. Mr. Thompson, sit down and be quiet, or I'll have you removed from this courtroom. This is your only warning. The courtroom went silent. Thompson sat, but his hands were shaking with fury or fear or both. Judge Anderson reviewed her notes for what felt like hours, but was probably 5 minutes. When she looked up, her expression had shifted from professional neutrality to something harder. I've reviewed the forensic evidence presented by Mrs. Wright's counsel. The handwriting analysis is conclusive. The signatures on these lien documents do not match established samples of Mrs. Wright's signature. The notary listed on these documents does not exist in county records and never has. The bank records show no loan origination matching the alleged debt. This court finds clear and convincing evidence of fraud. Thompson's face went from purple to gray. This foreclosure is dismissed with prejudice. The liens are declared void ab initio. Furthermore, this court is referring this matter to the district attorney for criminal investigation. Mr. Thompson, your development company is fined $50,000 for abuse of process. You personally are fined $25,000 for participating in an attempt to defraud this court and Mrs. Wright. These fines are payable within 30 days. Rebecca, sat in the witness box, feeling something between vindication and exhaustion, watching Donald Thompson's world collapse around him while the bailiff called for order in a courtroom erupting with murmurs. The criminal investigation that followed forced Thompson to sell his development company to pay the fines and legal fees. The agricultural supply dealership he'd owned for 40 years stayed in the family, but Stephen Thompson took over full control and made clear his father no longer had any decision-making authority. Donald Thompson spent his remaining years bitter and diminished, dying in 1975 at age 80 without ever acknowledging what he'd tried to do or offering anything resembling apology. Rebecca didn't attend his funeral. Some doors closed and stayed closed, not because she couldn't forgive, but because forgiveness required acknowledgement that never came. The publicity from the court case brought different kind of attention. The Fresno Bee ran a front-page story about the attempted fraud, and regional papers picked it up from there. By November, Rebecca was fielding calls from reporters wanting to write about the woman farmer who'd beaten a land grab scheme through meticulous record-keeping and refusal to be intimidated. National Geographic sent a photographer in early 1974, spending 3 days shooting Rebecca, working her fields, managing equipment, consulting with workers. The resulting article ran that summer with the headline, "California's Female Farming Pioneer," and photos that showed her as she actually was, competent, confident, covered in honest dirt from honest work. The quote they pulled for the magazine cover came from an hour-long interview where Rebecca had talked about everything from soil composition to gender politics. "When I was 17, a man told me women can't farm. He was describing his own limitations, not mine. The soil taught me what he couldn't. Capability has no gender." Letters arrived after that article, hundreds of them over the following months. Women thanking her for proving it could be done. Farmers asking for advice. Young girls writing to say they wanted to farm too, and had never seen anyone who looked like them doing it successfully. Rebecca answered every letter personally, often staying up past midnight to write detailed responses about equipment and financing and how to handle discrimination from suppliers. One letter came from someone unexpected. Nicole Thompson, age 21, Donald's granddaughter and Stephen's daughter. She was studying biology at Fresno State and wanted to switch to agricultural engineering, but her family was pressuring her to stay in a more traditionally female field. The letter was tentative and apologetic, acknowledging her grandfather's actions and asking if Rebecca had any advice for someone trying to enter farming with that legacy attached. Rebecca invited her to the farm for a Saturday afternoon in September 1975. Nicole arrived nervous and deferential, clearly expecting judgment or rejection or hostility. Instead, Rebecca showed her the operation, explained the irrigation system and crop rotation and equipment maintenance, treated her like any other person interested in agricultural knowledge. They sat in the kitchen afterward drinking coffee while Catherine played in the yard, and Nicole finally asked the question she'd been holding. "After everything my grandfather did to you, why would you help me?" Rebecca studied this young woman carrying someone else's sins and trying to build her own path despite them. "Are you your grandfather?" "No." "Do you love farming?" "I think so. I want to learn if I'm good at it." "Then you deserve the chance to find out. You're not responsible for what Donald Thompson did. You're only responsible for who you choose to be." That conversation planted seeds that grew into something larger. Rebecca established the Davis Agricultural Scholarship in 1976, funded initially with $12,000 per year from farm profits. The scholarship provided full tuition for women studying agriculture at any California university, with preference given to students from farming backgrounds who might not otherwise afford college. Nicole Thompson became the first recipient, a decision that raised eyebrows throughout the valley. People who'd watched the court case and knew the family history couldn't understand why Rebecca would help the granddaughter of a man who'd tried to destroy her. Rebecca's explanation was simple enough that reporters quoted it verbatim. Punishing Nicole for her grandfather's failures would make me just like the people who punished me for my father's accent. I'm not interested in generational revenge. I'm interested in creating opportunity. Nicole graduated in 1979 with a degree in agricultural engineering and went on to design water management systems for farms throughout the Central Valley. She never forgot who'd made her education possible, writing Rebecca every year at Christmas to update her on projects and progress. The scholarship grew as Davis farm profits increased, expanding from $12,000 to $15,000 annually by 1980, helping an average of 4 students per year. By 1998, 104 women had earned agricultural degrees, funded partially or entirely by that scholarship. 19 of them now owned farms in California, directly traceable legacy of Rebecca's decision to build opportunity instead of harboring resentment. The San Joaquin Women Farmers Alliance started in 1978 when Rebecca and 30 other women farmers met in a high school gym to discuss shared challenges: equipment access, credit discrimination, market disadvantages from being excluded from the informal networks where male farmers shared information and opportunities. The meeting was supposed to be informational, but by the end of the evening, they'd formed a cooperative with specific goals: pool resources for equipment purchases, share technical knowledge, market products collectively to negotiate better prices, provide mutual support for members facing discrimination from suppliers or lenders, create the network they'd been excluded from instead of waiting for someone to invite them in. Rebecca was elected president despite her protests that she didn't have time to manage both the farm and a cooperative. The other women overrode her objections with logic she couldn't argue against. You're the only one banks can't intimidate and suppliers can't ignore. We need someone they have to take seriously. Shirley Miller's daughter, Laura, was part of the alliance, now 33, and running her own 45-acre operation after years of managing Davis farm harvests. She brought younger perspective and marketing savvy that complemented Rebecca's operational expertise, and together they built the alliance into an organization that represented over 200 members by 1998. The Mentorship program started informally, farmers calling Rebecca for advice and her giving it freely until she realized the pattern could be systematized into something more effective. Between 1979 and 1992, she personally mentored 21 struggling farm families, providing equipment loans at no-interest land leases with fair terms technical guidance that would have cost thousands if purchased from consultants. The families came from different backgrounds, all white, but spanning Irish and Polish and Italian and German and Scots heritage, all facing some combination of bad luck and limited resources, and systems designed to favor established operations over newcomers. Rebecca's terms were consistent: fair rent payable after harvest, with failures forgiven, rather than compounded into debt that would destroy them. 17 of those 21 families were still farming in 1998, running combined operations that covered over 4,000 acres. Several had grown larger than Davis Farm building on foundations Rebecca had helped them establish. One farmer, a second-generation Irish immigrant who'd nearly lost everything to drought in 1980, sent his granddaughter to Fresno State on a Davis scholarship in 1996. The cycle of opportunity building on opportunity legacy, compounding across generations. Catherine's path diverged from Rebecca's in ways that initially felt like rejection, but ultimately revealed different kind of wisdom. At 18, she'd announced her intention to study law instead of agriculture, standing in the kitchen with college acceptance letters spread across the table and defiance in her expression that reminded Rebecca forcefully of herself at that age. "I know you want me to take over the farm, but I need to find my own way first." Rebecca had felt the urge to argue, to point out that the farm needed succession planning, and Catherine was the obvious choice, and walking away meant potentially losing something Joseph had started and 3 generations had built. But Margaret's voice echoed in her memory, telling teenage Rebecca to let people whisper because knowing yourself was enough. "The farm will be here if you want it, but you need to find your own truth first." Catherine studied agricultural law at UC Davis, spent 6 years working for a firm in Sacramento, representing farms in water rights and succession disputes, and built expertise in exactly the kind of legal complexity that had nearly destroyed Rebecca during the foreclosure fraud. She returned to the Valley in 1988, opened her own practice, and within 3 years was representing 60 farm operations, including Davis Farm. The conversation where Catherine explained her path came over dinner one evening when she was 31 and Rebecca was 63, both of them older and wiser about how purpose found people in unexpected ways. "I thought I didn't want to farm, but I realized I don't want to cure problems after they happen. I want to prevent them. And that starts with better legal protections for farmers. You serve the land by working it. I serve the land by protecting the people who work it." Rebecca understood then that legacy wasn't about forcing children to follow identical paths. It was about teaching them to value what mattered, and then trusting them to express those values in ways that fit who they were. Stephen Thompson died of cancer in 1987 at age 61, after spending his final years trying to repair damage his father had inflicted on multiple levels. He'd requested a meeting with Rebecca 3 months before his death, sitting in the Davis Farm kitchen, where he'd never been invited during his father's lifetime. "I want my grandchildren to know the truth about what my father did, about what you built despite him. Can I tell your story?" Rebecca had studied him carefully, this man who'd chosen to be better than the father who'd raised him. Tell them what matters. Their great-grandfather was wrong. Their grandfather tried to make it right. They have a responsibility to be better than both of us. Stephen's daughter, Nicole, kept that promise, teaching her own children about Rebecca Davis and the importance of judging people by their actions rather than their demographics. When Nicole's son entered agricultural engineering at UC Davis in 2015, he did so on a Davis scholarship, completing a circle that had started with his mother's education 40 years earlier. The California Agricultural Hall of Fame induction came in 1996. Recognition Rebecca had spent 54 years earning without ever seeking. 500 people filled the ceremony hall. Farmers and academics and government officials and women who'd benefited from scholarships and alliance membership and mentorship. Nicole Thompson gave the introduction speech standing at a podium with photos of Rebecca projected behind her. She spoke about being told women couldn't farm and responding by becoming the best farmer in the county, about being excluded from networks and building better networks that actually welcomed people, about facing fraud and fighting back with meticulous records and refusal to be intimidated. Rebecca Davis was told, "Women can't own land." She responded by owning more land than most men. Then she made sure other women could follow her path. That's not just success, that's revolution built 1 acre at a time. Rebecca's acceptance speech was brief, uncomfortable with attention, but understanding the importance of being visible for women still facing the same barriers she'd confronted. She stood at that podium looking out at hundreds of faces and thought about Joseph dying at 46, never having seen what his daughter would build. "My father Joseph taught me that land doesn't care about your last name, your gender, or your age. Land cares about work. I work. Everything I've built came from understanding that simple truth and refusing to let anyone convince me it didn't apply to women." The applause lasted 3 minutes. Rebecca stood there accepting it because it wasn't really for her. It was for every woman farmer who'd been told she couldn't, every girl who'd been steered away from agriculture, every person who'd been judged by category instead of capability. Rebecca turned 72 in 1998, still walking her fields daily, but transitioning operational control to Catherine, who'd finally decided that practicing agricultural law and actually farming weren't mutually exclusive. The operation had stabilized at 720 acres, profitable and sustainable, and employing 41 people who received benefits other farms didn't offer. Summer brought moments of reflection, standing in orchards she'd planted 40 years earlier, and knowing that her time as active operator was ending. Kenneth was 74, slowed by arthritis, but still sharp with numbers, still her partner in the truest sense. They'd built something together without him ever trying to take it from her, and that collaboration was its own kind of legacy. The last visit to what used to be Thompson Agricultural Supply happened on a Saturday afternoon in late June. The dealership had been sold and converted into a shopping center, the parts counter where Donald Thompson had humiliated her, replaced by a coffee shop and a shoe store. Rebecca stood in the parking lot looking at the space where she'd been told women couldn't farm, where she'd walked out with her face burning and her future uncertain. Kenneth's hand found hers warm and familiar. "Do you ever think about that day when he threw you out?" "Sometimes, but not with anger anymore. That day showed me what I was made of. Every day since I proved it." "You did more than prove it. You changed what's possible for everyone who comes after." They drove home through fields she'd built and land she'd protected and operations she'd helped save. And Rebecca understood that success wasn't measured in acres or revenue. It was measured in doors you opened for people who'd otherwise find them locked. Years passed like crops rotating through seasons. Rebecca celebrated her 80th birthday in 2005 with family and friends, her mobility limited, but her mind sharp as ever. Catherine had taken over full operations, running the farm with efficiency that made Rebecca proud and implementing innovations Rebecca never would have considered. The 1934 Farmall F12 sat in the barn, still non-functional, but preserved the tractor that had taught a grieving 20-year-old that broken things could be rebuilt. She died peacefully on a Tuesday morning in April 2018, 93 years old, in the farmhouse her father had built and her mother had defended, and she had expanded into something neither of them could have imagined. Catherine found her in the garden, among the German roses, gone without struggle or pain, her hands still dirt-stained from planting bulbs the day before. The funeral drew 900 people to a church that held 300, the overflow standing outside in spring sunshine, listening through open doors. Scholarship recipients spoke about opportunities Rebecca had created. Alliance members testified to networks she'd built. Farmers she'd mentored described how her advice had saved operations everyone else had written off. Nicole Thompson spoke for her family, acknowledging her grandfather's wrongs and Rebecca's choice to help despite them. "My grandfather tried to destroy her through fraud. She responded by funding my education. That's the kind of person who changes what's possible for everyone." Catherine delivered the eulogy standing at a podium with photos of her mother projected behind her, showing Rebecca at 17 and 35 and 60 and 80, always working, always building, always proving that land cared about effort more than expectation. "My mother was told she couldn't farm because women lack strength and intelligence for agriculture. She farmed 720 acres profitably for over 70 years. She was told she couldn't compete with men. She outcompeted nearly everyone. She was told to accept her limitations. She responded by creating opportunities for hundreds of other women to exceed theirs. That's legacy. That's what happens when you refuse to believe other people's definitions of what you're capable of achieving." They buried Rebecca in the small cemetery outside Parlia, next to Margaret and 3 plots from Joseph. Catherine planted German roses around the grave that week, cuttings from the memorial garden Rebecca had tended for 60 years. The headstone was simple granite, with words Rebecca had requested years earlier. "Der Boden kennt die Wahrheit." The soil knows the truth. Rebecca Davis, Wright, 1925 to 2018, farmer. The Davis farm continued under Catherine's management, 720 acres, producing crops that fed thousands and employing people who earned fair wages and benefits. The scholarship fund had grown to annual disbursements of $30,000, helping an average of 8 women per year pursue agricultural education. The alliance represented 300 member farms across California. 17 of the 21 families Rebecca mentored still farm several, now into their 3rd generation. In a filing cabinet in the farmhouse office, Catherine kept the original foreclosure notice from 1973, the document that had tried to steal everything her mother built. She'd framed it alongside Judge Anderson's ruling and used it when speaking to agricultural students about the importance of maintaining accurate records and standing up to fraud. Your grandmother kept this to remember that some people will always try to take what they didn't earn. But she also kept the judge's ruling to prove that documentation and determination can beat theft disguised as legal process. Know your rights. Keep your records. Never let anyone convince you that their fraud is your fault. The 1934 Farmall F12 remained in the barn, preserved as museum piece and memory, the tractor that had taught Rebecca Davis that broken things could be rebuilt if you had knowledge and persistence and refusal to accept defeat. Tour groups visiting the farm would ask about it, and Catherine would tell the story. Her mother at 19 rebuilding an engine most mechanics wouldn't touch. Every bolt turned was an argument against everyone who said women couldn't understand machinery. Every part fabricated proved capability had no gender. The soil still knew the truth in 2018, same as it had in 1942. Work mattered more than prejudice. Persistence outlasted discrimination. Land rewarded effort, regardless of who provided it. Rebecca Davis had spent 93 years proving those truths to anyone paying attention, and the proof was still growing in 720 acres of California dirt.